Welcome to Garden Chatter. I am Bren Hawes, and I'm with Adam Cortell, connecting bloggers, gardeners, and experts in the field so we can all learn to grow. If you're new to the Google Garden Chat Hangout, you're going to want to click up in your right-hand corner. You'll see a little grid, and up there when you click it, you'll see a Q&A box. You're going to click that, and then you'll have a screen that will appear on the right-hand side where you can see where our audience is asking questions. And also, please, we invite you to ask questions tonight. And if you still can't figure it out, you can click on my face right there on the Google screen and send me a Google message, or you can tweet me at BG_garden, and I will try to get your questions tonight as well. So, Adam?
All right, thank you so much, Brent. So I'm really excited tonight. We have some special guests. We have Brent and Becky from BeckysBulbs.com, and they are based in Virginia. They have been a long-time bulb growers and now importers and speakers. They also do a blog, and a podcast. So welcome to our Garden Chatter show, Brent and Becky.
Thank you. We're delighted to be with you.
All right. Well, I was wondering if you could just take a few moments and tell everyone a little bit about who you are and how long you've been at it and what you do down in Virginia, so we can get to know you a little bit better and where we can find you on the web.
Sure. We are a wholesale retail mail order flower bulb business. We are a business that started in about 1900 with Brent's grandfather, so it's not a new business. Brent is the third generation. Our son Jay and his wife Denise are the fourth generation. We used to be an organization that grew only what we sold, and we only grew daffodils. And then people began to request other bulbs, and as we began to search, and also as we began to run out of room on our own farm, as the intensity in gardening, which is really a happy thought in the U.S., became more, and people wanted more bulbs. We found people and growers who only wanted to grow, and what they just wanted to be a farmer. They didn't want to have a catalog. They didn't want to have a website, and so we now have relationships with about 50 growers that contract grow things for us in different parts of the world wherever they grow best. We still do grow some of the things here on our farm and on our land. We have a garden. We have an 8-acre garden on our business site. We also have a beautiful garden at our home, which is only a mile away. And so we are educators first and gardeners, and we also sell bulbs and try to help people understand how to make them do their best job in their garden situation.
We also breed daffodils. We are hybridizers, and we've introduced about 50 daffodil cultivars into the marketplace.
Wow, that's incredible. So how much land do you have? Was it 8 acres where you're growing your bulbs, or is that like a garden space, and in addition you have more acreage?
Now there's 28 acres totally, and the 8-acre garden is a teaching garden where we show people how to combine bulbs with perennials and flowering trees and shrubs. We use no chemicals, and so it is not a display garden. It's not a perfect garden. It's a real garden, and it's a garden designed for education and inspiration, and it's open 6 days a week, 10 to 4, free of charge.
Wow, that sounds incredible. I'd love to go visit sometime. I was wondering, Becky, so you married into this very long tradition of bulb growing. I was just wondering, in your history, did you grow up with horticulture, or was it kind of a new thing that you jumped into there?
I was always in the earth. Brent's mother called me Brent's earth woman because I was always in the ground. But before I knew Brent, I was a very practical woman. I'm still a practical woman. But I was a single mother with 2 children, and I was very, very intensely interested in knowing what was going on what was going in their bodies. So I grew what they ate, and so I was a vegetable gardener. I was not a flower gardener because you couldn't eat them. So that's where my practical side came. But
She's now learning to feed the soul as well as the tummy.
Very good.
very good.
Well, so like I had said earlier, I'm pretty much a complete newbie to bulbs. I mean, I've planted a few tulips and a few daffodils, but I was wondering, do you have a few words you could share, maybe what someone who's never really planted any bulbs should know to get started?
For nature, the Lord has created nature's perfect perennial, I think, in a flower bulb. It's a plant created with storage organs of starches and sugars, and created to deal with cold winters, and created to deal with hot, dry summers. The bulb simply retreats back underground. Comes up in the spring when the weather's good, there's plenty of moisture, plenty of light, and goes dormant in the summer. Starts growing again in the autumn, spring flowering bulbs do. And then the flower develops during the winter, and when the soil warms up and day length increases, they come up and bloom and provide wonderful show. But basically, bulbs are starchy storage organs. They're bulbs, corms, tubers, rhizomes, and tuberous roots. There are a number of bulbous vegetables also, onions, potatoes, carrots, anything with that starchy storage organ. But bulbs, what we're growing, are those with ornamental flowers. And they're a broad range. We here in Virginia actually have some sort of bulb in bloom all 12 months of the year.
That is fantastic.
Well, what I suggest to people who are not used to growing bulbs is to try to find a master gardener group or a gardener near you in your neighborhood, and because our wonderful US of A has so many different climates, so many plant zones, so many soil types, so many critters, so many things. And if you've never really planted one, try to find something that does really well in the area in which you live. And if you have shade, grow things that love the shade. If you have sun, grow things that love the sun. Don't fight Mother Nature. Make it, if it does really well, you're going to be happy with it, and you're going to do more as opposed to trying to fight Mother Nature. So that's my advice.
I love that. Another great place to reach out is online. And speaking of which, we have Nancy Wallace, who is an excellent person who shares beautiful bulbs, which Nancy was telling me earlier on Facebook that she grows a lot of your bulbs. And she just left a message saying, I love that I can meet the people who grow and provide some of my favorite bulbs. You have a great business. Love hearing about how you have evolved. So thank you, Nancy, for commenting.
And thank you for buying our bulbs, Nancy. We appreciate your business.
And come to see us.
I know. And to jump back to what you said about your website, your web presence, actually, I love your Facebook page. I know a year ago I had a question that I was just so confused about forcing an indoor bulb, and I had left a message, and I was able to speak with Brent within the hour. And you guys, I don't know how you do it, being the growers and nailing these out and answering questions. You are on top of it.
Well, we're very fortunate. We have a wonderful team. I married well.
Yeah.
I married a smart woman, and then I was smart enough to realize I didn't need to be in charge. But there are things that I enjoy doing and like to do. And then Becky had a smart son, and he married well. He has a smart one. We all have different strengths. And mine is I like people and I like plants, and they give me an office for my pocket, my cell phone, so probably when you called, they transferred you to my cell phone, and I was more than likely out in my garden or traveling somewhere.
And so we've got Adam. We've got to get Adam growing bulbs. I know you can do that out there in the Northwest.
Oh.
And the other viewers we have on there that are new to growing bulbs. So can you tell us, Brent and Becky, what should what should we look for when we're buying bulbs either online or at a retail store?
Well, Adam lives in a perfect part of, an almost perfect part of the world for growing bulbs. Pacific Northwest is just a great place, and one reason is that they've got moisture most of the year, except during the summertime when the bulbs want to be dormant and then they want to remain relatively dry. Now, things that Adam should look for: does he have a favorite color? Does he have the time of the year he wants to see something, or does he want a sequence of bloom right on through the year? So these are all things I think he should. Does he want to grow bulbs inside? Is that a hippeastrum I see in a pot behind you there? What people normally call an amaryllis, but there's some fun bulbs that you can grow in the house. So he needs just to kind of sort through and give some ideas. Now, our catalog, Becky is the composer of our catalog, and she does it in such a way as like she was a teacher, and there are various components of our catalog that can help people to make decisions. Do you want to tell about a little bit about that?
Sure. And, the winter hardiness zone is only one part of it. I mentioned the sun versus shade, and planting things in an area that is very well drained. Most bulbs don't want to sit where it's wet. But if you are going in a store and that's where you're buying them, one of the things that you need to look at or when you're picking it up is to make sure there's good weight. If it's lightweight, normally it's not going to have much oomph. If you're going online or you're looking in catalogs and things like that, look for sizes. Each bulb is not the same size. There's some daffodils that are really huge bulbs, and there's some daffodils that are really small bulbs, and that's the way they're supposed to be. It's like tall people and short people and wide people and skinny people. So bulbs are similar, but good weight is one of the keys if you are actually going in a store to buy them.
Becky, you have a chart in the center of our catalog that helps people to make choices.
Right, and in the center, and of course, if you're online, somehow I've got to get the chart online. I don't. We do have a bulb finder, but getting back to the chart that Brent was talking about, right smack in the center of our catalog, when you open it up, it's where the order form and all of that stuff is, but it rolls way out. And on the left-hand side is the order in which they bloom in a normal year. Now, we haven't had a normal year in a while, but it's pretty close. So they're listed in the order in which they bloom. And then there's a line for their botanical names, their nicknames, how many bulbs per square foot, whether they want sun, shade, wet, dry. There's so much information in one little page. It's like the old school teacher had the chart so that all the kids could find their multiplication tables and all that. That's one tiny little page with a ton of information. On our website, once you click on the catalog, whether it's summer bulbs or spring flowering bulbs, on the right-hand corner is Help, and when you put your cursor on Help, it says Bulb Finder, and there are tons of parameters: color, height, bloom time, season of bloom, country of origin, sun, shade, wet, dry, pest proof, on and on and on. And if you're looking for a particular color, it's just a great place, or any kind of bulb information. It's a great bulb search finder. Good way to help you design your garden using the bulb finder.
Well,
Okay.
I love our growing community. I just learned on the question and answer area here that you are on Instagram. So we're going to have to find you on Instagram through the holiday here. I'm sure you're showing some beautiful amaryllis, perhaps.
All that's Jay's fault. He's the one who does that. I'm a dinosaur, and I file images on my computer, and they use them, but Jay does all those things.
Yeah, I print emails for Brent to read. So, we all have our strengths, and Instagram is Jay. And Facebook is Jay. Jay does all of that. That's his strength.
And if you do email, please include a phone number so I can respond. I'll call you back, okay?
You did call me back, and I really appreciated that.
Yeah, he knew right where that that phone was, right there in the
That's
pocket.
awesome.
That's great. Well, also, Nancy Wallace shouted out that you have the best, in caps, descriptions in your catalog. So you make me look so good for my clients. I rely on your ratings when I order. So
Wow.
good words there.
Thank you.
Well,
Thank
we
you.
do grow them all. We trial every bulb that we sell in every season, both in a garden and on a pot. And actually, you grow bulbs on pots, not in them, because the soil is there for the roots. But in any event, we really do see them, and we are intimate with them. And we put hearts in front of those cultivars that are our favorites. We tend to have favorites that either last longer in bloom or perennialize better. Now, a term is often used for bulbs, and that's naturalized. And there are a few bulbs that do naturalize. It means a non-native plant that reseeds and spreads around by seed. And hybrid daffodils typically are not visited by insects, and they don't set seed, and they don't spread by seed. So daffodils perennialize, and then, there are little Chianodoxa and different kinds of bulbs actually naturalize in different parts of the country, depending on the pollinators where they are and whether conditions are right for the seed to germinate. And we gardeners are patient because it only takes 3 to 5 years for a bulb from seed to bloom. So most bulbs are actually produced by division and not from seed.
That's interesting. So yeah, so how long, most of the bulbs you are starting from like a scale then, or how do you, well, I guess that I'm thinking lily bulbs. I'm just wondering, like, when you're, what's that?
Lily bulbs are produced from scales, and actually you do get a bulblet from each scale when you treat them right. But you do have to give them a certain kind of treatment in order for that little bulb to form, and then you've got to grow it on for 3 years. But from one lily bulb, you can harvest a lot of scales to get bulblets. And lilies produce bulbs in a variety of ways. So, and lilies do naturalize in my garden. I do have lilies that are seeding about. Some even produce little bulbils in their leaf axils. So under the leaf, a little bulb is produced from some kinds of lily. So it's an interesting process. The daffodils, however, multiply by division, where you plant one bulb with one nose. Each time that bulb blooms, it initiates a new growth bud. So the first year you have 1, the second year 2, and then 4, and then 8, and then 16, then 32, and 64. But we go a step further. My father discovered that when a bulb is injured, it tends to replicate itself even more. So we actually cut bulbs in pieces and treat them in a particular way, and we can get up to 50 bulbs from one bulb in 3 years.
Wow.
So,
Wow.
pretty neat.
Yeah.
That's really cool.
Well, right now I'm not really able to get anything blooming. Do you have any suggestions for trying to get some bulbs to go inside now? What would be our options, or how can we force bulbs to give us some blooms as the days are getting darker and colder? Any thoughts on that?
Right, sure. There are some that you don't really have to force because you don't have to do anything to them except put them in a pot with a good, well-drained potting media, pine bark type thing. The hippeastrums, or amaryllis, as most people call them, are ones that do not require any special treatment except to be potted up and given a lot of sunlight, water initially to a point, just to get it going, and then water it well when it's growing actively. Paper whites, Tizetta type daffodils that are normally not terribly hardy but do not require any pre-cooling. Now, most of the spring flowering bulbs have to go through a winter in order to get them to bloom or to initiate a flower. But the paper whites and the hippeastrums oxalis are awesome inside during the winter. There's so many colors, leaf colors and flower colors. Some of the ornithogolems are awesome in the wintertime, but if you want other daffodils and you want tulips and you want hyacinths and all of those things, you either have to pot them up and put them in a 50-degree place for 12 to 16 weeks to get them rooted and you know, lower the temperature to about 40 for a while until they get enough, until they feel like they've been through a winter. Or you can go to Brent and Becky's bulbs to their pre-cooled section, and there are bulbs that we have had in the cooler since September, so that they feel like they have gone through a winter and they're pre-cooled dry. We ship them second day air, ask you to be ready to put them in the soil, and then you can have those in January and February when it's miserable outside and you have beautiful flowers and lots of nice smells inside.
The oxalis are a great choice for people who are really kind of beginning because it's a very low light plant and it works well inside as a house plant. And the paperwhites and the hippeastrums all tend to stretch a bit in the house because that's the equivalent of heavy shade. It's beneficial to have extra light and cool light, like a cool fluorescent or a grow light, but actually only about a foot above them actually will keep them nice and compact so that you don't have to worry about staking them up or anything like that.
Right, and because when they grow in their normal season, the day length is very long, and we're asking them to grow during the winter when the day length is very short. So that's why they keep stretching, they keep thinking, I know there's light out there somewhere. So they get taller and taller looking for the sunlight.
Well, I love buying new Amaryllis every year, especially for the holiday and Christmas. And but I also like to try to get them to bloom again, which has been a challenge for me. I have one here that I just brought out of my greenhouse. It was kind of in a dark shelf for a little bit, but it had babies. And
you know, they call them pups.
Oh, pups?
Yeah, pups.
Like a puppy?
That's right.
That's cool. I can remember that. So, is there anything I can do with this? Like,
yes. Yes, indeed. When they finish blooming, you want to keep them growing. Give them as much light as possible.
okay.
When there's no longer danger of freezing temperatures outside, you can take the pot outside. You can actually put it in your garden over the summer and allow it to grow. But in September, that's the time you want to hold off moisture. You want to force it to go dormant. And it needs to go dormant. If it's in the ground, you dig it and just let it dry off and hold it dormant for 2 months in a cool place. In that cool dormancy, the bud will develop, and then you can pot it up after the 2 months. And if you want it quickly and for Christmas, give it some bottom heat. A heat mat from like a seedling heat mat that you put a tray of seedlings on will get it to start growing quickly. And then give it extra light, and a fan blowing on them is also beneficial. It helps them to stay shorter and actually makes them a bit stronger.
That 2-month period of time where they're going dormant, for me, is like forcing it to take a nap. Everybody needs a nap or a little rest, and if we ask something to grow continually 12 months a year, then eventually they'll tire themselves out. So that nap is very helpful.
Well, I just got my phone out, and I marked on my calendar September. I'm going to pull those out of the garden for a nap.
Good for you.
Now,
Thank you.
they actually, surprisingly, these plants are hardy through zone 7 if they're planted deeply enough. And we actually have them in the garden coming back year after year. They bloom in May in our garden here in Virginia. In Oregon, they'd probably bloom about the same time. But you may live in an area where they're they'll be hardy for you.
At least Adam. I'm not
Yeah,
sure.
Adam, not
Yeah.
not Brady.
Not Bren. No. Not gonna survive up there.
Yeah, sorry, Bren.
Well, I was wondering, like, a little bit on the time frame of planting bulbs. So we just had our first frost last night. So, I mean, is there some time frames people should be thinking about? Is if the ground is still workable, we can still plant some bulbs till when in the winter or the early spring? How should we think about that?
You know, people get a little bit frantic when the weather begins to cool off. Well, actually, most spring flowering bulbs do not begin to make roots until soil temperatures are below 60 degrees. And that's typically about the time you're getting your first frost. So now is an ideal time for you to plant them. Bren, you've probably had a bit of frost already. Your soil is probably already cool in the 50 to 60 range, may even be cooler. Bulbs will continue to root even though the soil is below 40 degrees, as long as it's not freezing. Now, if you've had a hard freeze and there's a crust on the ground, crust of frost, you can break that crust off. Plant your bulbs, because bulbs want to go 3 times their height deep, almost all of them. Some benefit from an even deeper planting, but in any event, go ahead and put your bulbs in, put a good mulch on them after you plant, so you're insulating that, keeping the soil cool but not frozen, and they'll go ahead and root. And be sure to water your bulbs well after you plant them. Often in dry soil in the fall is a problem because the bulbs do not root if there's not sufficient moisture.
That sounds like very good advice.
That's perfect because, I've been tweeting for the past couple of days because of the big storm heading across most of the U.S., and so, I'm in Ohio once again. So I was in the big rush trying to get those bulbs planted, and I guess I should clarify, not because I couldn't plant them because it was getting too cold, but because I didn't want to be out there in my heavy Carhartt planting. It's so much nicer in 60 degrees to be planting. And as far as rain, Ohio, Michigan, Indiana, we're getting plenty of rain right now, so it's perfect.
Wow, that's great. That's wonderful. So how long is it going to stay really cold where you are? How long will this front be there?
It looks like they're forecasting for the next week. I mean, in the record lows in the 20s already, and that's crazy. But we're Northerners, we can take it, right?
Yeah, but then I would go ahead, if you've just recently planted your bulbs, I'd put a layer of mulch on top, which will kind of insulate the soil a bit.
Okay, thank
help
you.
them get a good start.
Very good. I just wanted to shout out to Nancy Wallace again. She says, great info on the Amaryllis. I love these bulbs. Thank you for the tips.
Oh, good. Yeah, good. There's some fun ones coming along. Most people are used to the giant, big flowered Amaryllis, but there are a whole new group from South Africa that are coming along that has much more, people are used to the softball-sized flowers, and there's a whole group now that have tennis ball-sized flowers. And I think they're a lot more attractive, personally. But also, they're great garden plants if you live in a zone where you can plant them in your garden. Actually, I think they're even a little bit hardier than the big ones.
He's hoping, anyhow, for sure.
Yeah. Well, they're coming back in my garden. Becky and I don't garden together.
Make sure you follow Nancy on Instagram. She's at Wallace Gardens. She shares some beautiful amaryllis through the winter. And being a Northerner, I really appreciate that because it just lightens up, it warms you up to see those beautiful bulbs.
Yeah, we do follow her, Jason.
Awesome.
Yay.
Well, you guys mentioning that reminds me, just of a question I had about, is there any thing that you're really excited about right now? Any new bulbs or that you can share? What are you fired up about right now?
Well, I am extremely excited about one of our daffodil hybrids called Golden Echo. There is an organization called the American Daffodil Society, and while some of them are really good gardeners in general, most or many of the members are very big on showing these perfect flowers, but they have uh, titles of some or of the daffodils that have there are show flowers and they win beautiful ribbons, but they're great garden flowers. And it's called the Wister Award, and our very own hybrid Golden Echo is the newest Wister Award winner. So we're excited about one of our babies.
Congratulations, that's great.
Yeah.
We do introduce some of our daffodil hybrids. We introduced a new one this year called Snow Baby.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a lovely little miniature. It's just 6 inches tall, little white trumpet one, and a very good one for forcing. So you do have to root it, and again, bulbs root best at 50 to 60 degrees, and once rooted, then give it additional cooling at about 35 degrees for about 10 weeks. The earlier they bloom, the shorter period of cold you need to give them. So it's the early bloomers that are the easiest ones to, and you know, forcing is just tricking the bulbs. You're fooling Mother Nature a little bit. You're making them think their time has come. So, but this one is a great one for forcing, and it's fun on a pot because it's nice and compact, and it's long-lasting in bloom. That's another thing that I'm always thinking is important. If a flower lasts longer, I think it has a greater value. Now, Golden Echo has an added value, and that is it's multi-flowered and it's wonderfully sweetly fragrant. It's a jonquilla type daffodil. Many people mistakenly call all daffodils jonquils, but only the kind that are multi-flowered and sweetly fragrant are the jonquils. And we primarily have been breeding jonquilla hybrids. We like them because they have nice narrow leaves like my little finger instead of my thumb with the big wide-leaved daffodils. Much easier to hide in the garden after they bloom. And after all, you know, those leaves are the plant's solar collectors, and unless they get enough light, so you don't want to go putting rubber bands around the leaves or cutting them prematurely. They need at least 6 to 8 weeks. 8 weeks is best after they bloom, and then as soon as the leaves are beginning to turn yellow, it is safe to go ahead and cut them. You don't have to wait for them to die down completely. But those leaves are solar collectors, and just remember the bulbs underneath are the batteries. So, you know, most people can think in those terms. And too many people are in shade denial, and they plant daffodils in the shade. And when you ask if they planted them in the shade, they'll say, "Oh no, there weren't any leaves on the trees when they bloomed." Well, it's after they bloom that they're making next year's one.
I like to.
Oh, go ahead.
I like to strategically plant mine. A lot of mine end up next to the heat, sun-loving hostas, so they just kind of cover them up. So I don't have to mess with the tulips after they're done blooming.
You know what is wonderful to plant with your hostas also are some of the alliums.
Oh.
You know, we love it. We in the garden tours when visitors come and they see the big allium bulbs, you know, above the hostas, and they'll say, "Wow, what kind of hosta is that? I've never seen one with those kind of flowers before."
That companion relationship is important for another reason. The daffodil or the allium or whatever is blooming earlier in the spring and getting most of its growth early. The hosta comes a bit later. They don't share the same root zone. The bulb is down below, and the hosta actually helps keep the bulb drier in its dormancy because bulbs like to sleep in a dry bed, just like you and I do. That's Becky's saying. But so they're great companions. They actually benefit each other. And there are many bulbs that are great companions with other perennials and annuals and ground covers, trees, shrubs, even vegetables. You know, after I plant my bulbs, I sow kale and lettuce, leftover kale and lettuce seed over my bulbs, and they form a wonderful carpet for the bulbs to come up through. And if I
Aw.
don't plant something, the good Lord is gonna, and I'm gonna have native plants until I pull them out, and then I call them weeds.
I love that. So I want to do a shout out really quick to another audience member who just wanted to say they love your bulbs and that you married smart. It's Lisa, and you can follow her at Houseplant Guru. She's a independent garden center owner up in Michigan. You may know her. She's a fellow Garden Writer Association member. And speaking of which, Brent, you are an amazing speaker. I remember I first heard you a couple of years back at the Independent Garden Center show. You spoke, yes. How can people
Right?
how can people find out where you're speaking, or perhaps get a hold of you so you can come and speak at their events?
On the website, it says lectures and events, and there is a lecture schedule, and then there are lecture topics. And sometimes people look at the schedule and see that he's going to be nearby, and they call the office, or there's another link that just says email us, and it comes to me. So there are people that will email and say, I'd love for Brent to come, you know, during this time frame, and is he available, and yada, yada, yada. And so that's how it works out. But if he's going to be in your area, it certainly is economically advantageous to, you know, piggyback. And because, you know, people can share the travel or combine clubs together or something like that. So it is on the websites, events and schedules.
Very good. Well, I so appreciate you guys coming on. I know this is one of your busiest, probably your busiest time of the year, and you carved out some time to spend with us. And I love your analogies of they like to sleep in the dry bed, and also the solar power and the batteries. Those are just great things to think about when we're thinking about bulbs. So, Brent, I was wondering, and Becky, you've seen quite a history of bulb growing, and I'm just wondering if you have any thoughts on some of the changes you've seen. I don't know if there was, you said you mostly grow, or you completely naturally with no pesticides or chemicals. I imagine 40 or 50 years ago that may have looked different, or even 20 years ago. I just wondered if you had any thoughts on that.
Well, the majority of flower bulbs are actually grown for cut flowers or for pots. We gardeners are using 20% of them. When my grandfather started off, he saw a cottage industry where people were picking the daffodils that they brought with them from Europe and had passed around, and you pick daffodils, by the way, you don't cut them. Run your finger down the stem, put your thumb next to it, pull up and snap, you got a nice solid white stem. You put it in tepid water, and the hollow stem fills up. If you cut it, it'll never fill up with water. The flower lasts longer. In any event, my grandfather certainly did grow things naturally. It was before chemicals. And it's something that my father followed suit in. He would feed the soil. He would grow cover crops. He would take people's leaves and spread them on the fields. And it's just something that we've grown into doing. And for the past 20 years, we simply feed the soil. We plant cover crops. We take manure, horse manure. We mix it with wood chips. We mix that with leaves and all the garden waste. We turn it frequently and feed the wonderful microorganisms, that soil food network, that actually work better when there's plenty of air, and we turn it into black gold. And all of Becky's garden, Becky gardens on heavy gray mottled clay,
I call it porcelain.
I garden on sandy soil. It has a high water table. When we plant things in that gray clay, the things that like good drainage aren't happy campers. So we put at least 6 inches of compost before we plant. And actually, we have stopped, for the most part, digging holes to plant bulbs. We put compost down first. We lay bulbs on top at proper spacing, typically 3 times their width apart. And then we cover with more compost because we want to create a sequential planting with either perennials, ornamental grasses, etc. after the bulbs. And it's a win-win. We also use a lot of mulches. But it's at home, I have lovely sandy, loamy soil. Right? Most of the world gardens on clay.
But we have seen a huge difference through the years. The soil in which my garden sits used to be a corn, wheat, and soybean farm, no till. So there was a lot of nutrients sucked out of the soil and not much given back. And we've been gardening, I've been gardening here for about 9 years. And it took about 3 years to even get earthworms back. There was no life in the soil. So putting compost on top of the ground and the rains and the snows coming, it's finally getting down in there, but it's going to take a long, long time. We humans, God bless us, we sometimes forget to give back to the earth. We think that the earth God created and it's really good, and that is the case. But it's been giving and giving and giving and giving for millions of years, and I'm really happy to hear how many more people are understanding and giving back by putting compost on top of the ground or in the ground.
And the polder in which our bulbs are grown, the growers there are adding about 3 inches of compost a year to that sand because we're 3 meters below sea level where the bulbs are being grown. It's a little microclimate, but they're feeding the soil, and they're using far less chemicals than they did 30 years ago, which is exciting. And growers are always looking for something new and different and fun and exciting and successful, because if gardeners are successful, then they'll continue to buy bulbs. So we're always looking for that new bulb that's a little better, longer lasting in bloom, etc. And we're seeing a real interest because, the flowers make people smile. And, if you can help somebody to smile, you've done a great thing in your life. And more communities are planting more bulbs. They find that, community is a much happier place. College campuses and universities are discovering that when they have color, students who are coming to take a look at the college are a lot more apt to go to a college that's very pretty. The campus is lovely. And businesses are discovering that, the color landscaping really pays off.
Apartments are rented, have a higher percentage of renters if there's color. And even locally, we've heard from teachers that when there's color on the elementary and middle school and high school campuses, that there's less litter, the children are happier. It goes without saying, the flower's future soul.
Absolutely, that is just fantastic. I'm so glad to hear that you just have been growing things naturally all along. That's wonderful. And you've shared so many nice, wonderful little nuggets of knowledge through this. Really appreciate that. Brenda, do you have any last questions or thoughts before we wrap it up?
Only I'm going to encourage people, because I love Twitter, if they would follow them, Brent and Becky at Brent and Becky's with an S at the end. They're sharing some wonderful information, so I'm sure we could continue the conversation on Twitter and Facebook, right?
Absolutely.
Absolutely, and go and check out their website at brentandbeckysbulbs.com.
That's right.
Yep.
Yes.
Well, again, I really, really, really appreciate you both coming on. I know you're busy, so just wonderful talking with you. Really enjoyed it.
Thank you for inviting us.
We enjoyed it also.
Great. Well, thank you, and have a good night. I'll go ahead and sign off with that.
Yeah. See ya.